Andre Whitfield was 38 years old, sitting in a gas station parking lot, when the woman who once called his dreams a waste of her time came walking straight toward his new G-Wagon like she owned it. 18 months earlier, Brianna had signed the divorce papers herself, certain the business would fail, certain he'd end up with nothing. Now she stood at his window, hand on her hip, demanding her share of a success she never believed in. Andre didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He simply reminded her she'd gotten exactly what she asked for. But as she turned to storm off, she muttered 4 words under her breath. What Preston said I deserved, and something in Andre went cold. He drove away, calm on the outside. But that name would not leave him alone. And by morning, he would understand just how much he didn't know. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The dealership lot was empty by 4 o'clock. Most buyers brought somebody, a wife, a friend, someone to take a picture, make some noise, turn the moment into a story they could tell later. Andre Whitfield walked out alone, pressed the key fob once, and watched the black G-Wagon flash its lights at him like it already knew who he was. He stood there for a second, just one. Then he got in, adjusted the mirror, and pulled out onto the street. No pictures, no calls, no posts. That wasn't how he did things. Andre had built Whitfield Freight Solutions from one used box truck and a spreadsheet he kept on a cracked laptop. That was 6 years ago. Back then, he was running deliveries himself. Up before sunrise, home after dark, smelling like diesel and cardboard. He'd call dispatchers who wouldn't call him back. He'd pitch contracts to warehouse managers who looked straight through him. He'd eat gas station food in his cab because he didn't have time to stop anywhere else. Brianna thought it was embarrassing. She never said it exactly like that. She was smarter than that. She said things like, I just think you need to be realistic, Andre. And, you've been saying this is going to take off for 2 years now. And, most people don't make it in logistics, baby. That's just the truth. She called it support. He knew what it was. The worst year was year 3. A major contract fell through in October. 2 of his drivers quit in November. By December, he was behind on the truck payments, and the business account had less than $400 in it. Brianna started leaving real estate listings on the kitchen counter, houses in suburbs 40 minutes away, in neighborhoods she liked the look of. She had a vision for their life, and that vision did not include a man in a warehouse at 11 o'clock at night, renegotiating insurance rates. She filed for divorce in January. I can't keep waiting for a plan that isn't working, she told him. She said it like she was doing him a favor, like she was cutting them both loose from something broken. He signed the papers in March. He slept in his office for 6 weeks after that, on a cot he bought from a surplus store. He didn't tell anyone, not his sister Yolanda, not his friend Kwame. He just quietly closed the door and kept working. He refinanced the trucks, restructured the routes, and landed a regional grocery chain contract that Kwame helped him pitch in April. By summer, they had 7 trucks running. By the end of that year, 12. Last month, Whitfield Freight Solutions had signed a 7-figure regional contract with a distribution network covering 4 states. He hadn't posted about that, either. The G-Wagon rolled smooth down Halsted Street, engine barely making a sound. The neighborhood looked the same as it always had. Corner stores, church marquees, kids on bikes cutting through the intersection without looking. Andre had driven these streets in a beat-up Silverado for years. He knew every pothole, every light that ran a second too long. He hadn't planned to come this way. His townhouse was in the opposite direction. But something pulled him here anyway, not to show off, not to perform anything for anyone watching. Just to feel it. to drive through streets that had seen him struggling and know quietly and privately that the struggle was over. He kept both hands on the wheel. His face was still. If you didn't know him, you'd think he was just another man driving home on a Friday afternoon. That was exactly how he liked it. He needed gas anyway. There was a Marathon station 3 blocks up that he'd been stopping at since his Silverado days. The owner, Mr. Okafor, always had the pump prices a little lower than the Shell on the main road. Andre turned in out of pure habit, the same way he always had. Slow roll over the speed bump, pull to the second pump on the left. He put the car in park. He reached for the door handle, and that's when he saw it. A white Lexus SUV parked along the side of the building, near the air pump. He recognized it before he even processed why. The way you recognize something, your body knows before your brain catches up. The vanity plate, the dent in the rear bumper that had been there since 2021. Brianna's car. He didn't move. She was standing outside it, leaning against the driver's door with her phone in her hand. But she wasn't looking at her phone anymore. She was looking at the G-Wagon. Her eyes moved from the grille to the rims to the tinted windows, slow and deliberate, the way someone looks at something when they're trying to figure out what it costs. Then her gaze came to rest on the driver's side, right where Andre sat. She knew. He could see it in the way her expression shifted, the small tightening around her mouth, the lift of her chin. She knew it was him. Andre stepped out of the G-Wagon and closed the door behind him. The air smelled like exhaust and cut grass. A car radio was playing somewhere on the other side of the lot, something slow and old. He pulled the gas cap open and reached for the pump handle. He heard her footsteps before he saw her. Brianna walked across the lot like she had somewhere to be, chin up, shoulders back, the same way she always moved when she was building herself up to say something. She had on a cream linen blazer and sunglasses pushed up on her head, and she looked like she'd spent the last 18 months doing very well for herself. Andre didn't stop what he was doing. He pressed the grade, slid the nozzle in, and clicked the lever. Andre. Her voice was the same. That particular tone she used when she wanted to sound reasonable, but had already decided what the conversation was going to be. He turned to look at her. Brianna? So that's a G-Wagon. She stopped a few feet away and looked at the truck the way she'd looked at it from across the lot, top to bottom, slow, cataloging it like an appraiser. What do those run now? 150? More? What do you need, Brianna? She pulled her sunglasses down onto her face, even though she was standing in the shadow of the pump canopy. I need to talk to you, since you don't return calls. I don't have your number saved. She made a small sound, not quite a laugh. I heard about the contract, the distribution deal. She crossed her arms. 4 states, I heard. Andre watched the numbers climb on the pump screen. He didn't say anything. That's a big deal, she said. You know that's a big deal. And I just... She exhaled through her nose, like the words were frustrating her before she even got them out. I think there's something we need to talk about what's fair. What's fair? Yes. She said it firmly, like the word itself was enough of an argument. Andre, I was there, for years. I was there when it was hard, when you were behind on everything, when you couldn't make payroll, when I didn't know if we were going to lose the apartment. I lived through all of that with you. You left. I left because I had to. Her voice went tight. I stayed as long as I could. And everything you built, the foundation of it, was built during our marriage, while I was supporting this family. You were working at a marketing firm. I was supporting us emotionally, Andre. You don't just get to erase that. The pump clicked. He pulled the nozzle out, set it back on the cradle, and replaced the gas cap. He turned to face her fully. "I'm not erasing anything," he said. His voice was even. "You filed. You hired an attorney. You listed every asset and every liability, and you agreed to a settlement. You signed the papers." "I know what I signed." "Then you got exactly what you asked for." He said it without heat, without satisfaction even. Just the plain fact of it. Her jaw tightened. She pulled her sunglasses off entirely and held them at her side. That settlement was based on what the company was worth then. It's worth 10 times that now. And I think any fair person would say that a wife who stood by her husband during the building of something deserves to share in what that something becomes. We were divorced before it became anything. Because you wouldn't listen. She stopped, took a breath, repositioned herself, the way she always did when she'd said something she didn't mean to. "Look, I'm not here to fight. I'm here because I think you're a reasonable man, and because—" A small pause. "Because Preston said I deserved more than what I walked away with. And I think he's right." Andre looked at her for a moment. Just a moment. "Preston, your husband." She lifted her chin slightly. "Yes." He nodded once, slow, like he was filing something away. "You should talk to an attorney," he said. "If you think you have a claim, go file one." "Andre, it was good to see you, Brianna." He walked to the driver's side, opened the door, and got in. She said something else. He didn't catch it. He pulled out of the pump lane, eased over the speed bump, and turned back onto Halsted without looking in the mirror. He sat in his driveway for a while after he got home. The engine was off. The street was quiet. The garage door was still closed in front of him, and the porch light above the side door burned orange against the fading sky. Preston said, "I deserved more than what I walked away with." He turned the sentence over slowly. Not, "I think I deserve more." Not, "my attorney thinks." Not, "I've been talking to someone," Preston said. Brianna had never been the kind of woman who took directions. She had opinions before anyone else had finished forming a question. She didn't echo people. She led them. So why was she standing in a gas station parking lot reading directly from somebody else's script? Andre sat with that for a long time. Andre called Yolanda at 8:30. She picked up on the second ring. He could hear her TV in the background. Some kind of home renovation show, the kind she always had running while she worked. "Tell me something good," she said. "I saw Brianna today." A pause. The TV got quieter. "Where?" "Gas station on Halsted." She spotted the truck. "Of course she did." Yolanda's voice dropped the lightness immediately. "What happened?" Andre told her. All of it. The way Brianna had walked across the lot, the speech about sacrificed years, the part about what was fair. He kept it flat and factual, the way he always did when he was still processing something and didn't want emotion coloring the account before he understood it. Yolanda listened without interrupting. That itself was a measure of how seriously she was taking it. "She said Preston told her she deserved more than what she walked away with," Andre finished. "That's the part I can't let go of." Preston Vance. Yolanda said the name like she was placing it on a shelf to look at. "Yeah." What does that mean?" "It means—" She stopped. He heard her set something down, ceramic on a hard surface. "Okay. I wasn't going to say anything because it wasn't anything solid, but I was running a sweep last week. Fraud pattern database I use for client screening at work." Andre straightened slightly in his chair. "His name popped up," she said. "Preston Vance. It wasn't a charge, it wasn't a conviction, just a flag. The kind that shows up when someone's been adjacent to a complaint that got reported but never fully pursued. What kind of complaint? Financial. That's all I could see. The record was tied to a civil case. Looked like a settlement, which means it probably got buried under an NDA. Her voice was careful, measured. I'm not saying the man is a criminal, Andre. I'm saying his name is in a database I trust, and now you're telling me he's coaching your ex-wife on what she's owed. The room felt a little smaller than it had a minute ago. I'm just saying it's worth knowing, Yolanda added. After they hung up, Andre didn't move for a while. He sat at his kitchen table with his phone face down in front of him, and the overhead light a little too bright, and the house a little too quiet. He thought about Brianna in the parking lot, composed and certain, saying Preston said like it was gospel. Then he got up and went to the office. The locked cabinet was in the corner behind his desk. Gray metal, 2 drawers, the kind you'd see in any office supply store. He'd bought it during the divorce because Patrice had told him to keep physical copies of everything. He'd put the files in there the day the settlement was finalized and hadn't opened it since. The key was on a ring in his desk drawer underneath a box of staples. He found it, unlocked the cabinet, and pulled the bottom drawer open. The folders were exactly where he'd left them, tabbed and labeled in his own handwriting. Settlement agreement, asset disclosure, bank records, business. Bank records, personal, attorney correspondence. He pulled them all out and laid them on the desk. He started with the asset disclosure. 12 pages, stapled twice, Brianna's signature at the bottom of the last page. He read it slowly, the way he probably should have read it the first time. On the 3rd page, he found it. A note in the margin, in Patrice's small, precise handwriting, verify, vendor act, discrepancy, cross-ref, bus, STMT, OGDEC. He remembered her mentioning it. A quick mention on a phone call, something she called an irregularity she wanted to look at. And Andre had said, he could hear himself saying it, if it's not going to hold up the signing, let it go. I just want this done. She had let it go, because he'd asked her to. He pulled the business bank statements from the folder labeled Bank Records, Business, and spread them across the desk. August through December, the final year of the marriage. It took him 20 minutes to find what she'd been pointing at. 4 withdrawals, spread out enough to look routine. 1 in September, 1 in October, 2 in November. Each one between $4,000 and $6,000, routed out of his operating account to a vendor line item he didn't recognize, Crestline Logistics Solutions. He sat back in his chair and looked at the name. He ran every vendor he'd used that year through his memory. Fuel suppliers, maintenance contractors, the insurance broker, the freight software platform, even the guy who'd repaired the dock lift at his warehouse twice that fall. Crestline Logistics Solutions was not one of them. He picked up his phone and looked at the time. 10:47. He scrolled to Patrice Ward in his contacts and pressed call. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice alert in a way that said she hadn't been asleep. Andre. I'm sorry for the hour, he said. Don't be. What is it? He looked at the name on the bank statement. The 4 withdrawals. Patrice's handwritten note in the margin of a document he'd rushed through 18 months ago because he'd wanted the pain to be over. I want to reopen this, he said. Not for the money. For the truth. Patrice Ward's office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown that smelled like carpet cleaner and old coffee. Andre had been there twice before. Once to start the divorce, once to sign the settlement. Both times he'd sat in the same chair across from her desk, a low-backed leather chair the color of dark caramel, and both times he'd left feeling like a man who had survived something without fully understanding what it was. He sat in that same chair now, on a Saturday morning, with a manila folder on his knees and the city spread out gray and flat behind the windows. Patrice sat across from him. No jacket today, just a dark blouse, reading glasses up on her head. She had the kind of stillness that came from years of hearing difficult things and not flinching. She held the asset disclosure in both hands and read Patrice's own margin note like she was seeing it for the first time, and for the 100th time at once. "I wrote this during our third call," she said, "before you asked me to move on. I know. I want you to hear me say that I should have pushed harder." She set the paper down flat on the desk. "You were done, I understood that, but I should have pushed harder." "We're pushing now," Andre said. She looked at the bank statements he'd laid out beside the disclosure. The 4 withdrawals, the name, Crestline Logistics Solutions. She studied them without touching them at first, the way someone might look at a crack in a wall before deciding whether it was structural. Then she picked up a pen and a legal pad. "Tell me every vendor you used that August through December," she said. He told her. She wrote each name down without comment. When he finished, she circled the gap on the page where Crestline should have appeared in his memory and didn't. "All right," she said. She pulled the bank statements closer. "I'll get a forensic accountant engaged by Monday. I want a full pull on every outgoing transfer from your business accounts in the 24 months before the settlement was signed." She looked up at him over the papers. "I'd flagged a 30-day window. I think we need to go wider." "Do it," Andre said. "This could take some time." "I know." He looked at the name on the bank statement one more time. "I've got time." He called Kwame from the parking garage. Kwame didn't ask many questions on the phone. He never did. Andre said he needed eyes on the old company records from the marriage years, the operational files, anything tied to vendors and contracts from that period. Kwame said, "I still have the archive drives. Come by the warehouse." Andre drove there in 20 minutes. The warehouse on Kedzie was where the company had started. 4 bays, a loading dock, a small glass-walled office in the corner that Andre had slept in on a cot twice during the worst stretch of the first year. Kwame had the archive drives spread across the work table in the back office when Andre walked in, a thermos of coffee steaming beside them, and a laptop already open. "Talk to me," Kwame said. Andre talked. He laid it out clean and straight, the same way he had with Yolanda, same way he had with Patrice. Kwame listened with his arms folded and his eyes steady, nodding at the parts he already knew: the lean period, the vendor bills that had stacked up, the months when cash moved in ways that hadn't made complete sense, but that Andre had blamed on his own stretched attention. "Crestline Logistics Solutions," Kwame repeated. "You recognize it?" Kwame was quiet for a moment. "Pull the drive from the third quarter of that year, the one labeled Ops Vendor Q3. Andre found it, slid it into the laptop. Kwame navigated the folders with the ease of someone who had built the system himself. He opened a vendor correspondence folder and started scrolling. "Here." He turned the screen so Andre could see. An invoice, $4,300, Crestline Logistics Solutions. The remit to address was a P.O. Box in Naperville. The invoice number format didn't match any of Andre's other vendors. Slightly different font, slightly different spacing, the kind of thing you'd only notice if you were looking. "There are 3 more, Kwame said. "I can see them in the payment log." He opened another window. "I always thought these were your calls. You handled vendor approvals." "I didn't approve these," Andre said. Kwame looked at him. Then he opened a browser and went to the Illinois Secretary of State Business Registry. He typed in Crestline Logistics Solutions. The registration pulled up in seconds. Registered agent, registered address. And there, in the field for the organizer of record, Preston D. Vance. The room went very quiet. Andre read the name twice. Then he stood up from the table and walked to the far end of the office, the part where the wall met the loading dock door. He stood there with his back to Kwame and his hands at his sides, and he breathed. Just breathed. Because 18 months of mental math had just collapsed into one single fact. Preston wasn't the man Brianna had found after the marriage fell apart. Preston was why the marriage fell apart. He'd been there the whole time, inside the accounts, inside the relationship, building something while Andre was busy holding everything else up, working double shifts and skipping paychecks and trying to save a company that someone was quietly robbing from the inside. His jaw was tight. His hands weren't quite steady. He stood there for a long moment. Then he turned around. Kwame hadn't said a word. He was just there, present and still, the way he always was. Andre walked back to the table. He sat down. He looked at the screen one more time, that name plain and damning in a government database, and then he looked at Kwame. "I don't want to move on this yet," he said. His voice was level. "I want everything documented first, every invoice, every transfer, every registration record." He paused. "No confrontation until the picture is complete." Kwame nodded once. "Then let's build the picture." Patrice called on a Tuesday afternoon. She didn't say much on the phone, just that she had findings and that he should come in. Her voice was the same flat, professional tone it always was, but there was something underneath it. A weight. The kind of weight that meant the news was bigger than expected. Andre was at the warehouse when she called. He finished what he was doing, locked up the office, and drove downtown. She had a second folder on her desk when he walked in, thicker than the first one. She was already seated, reading glasses on this time, a yellow legal pad covered in notes beside her coffee cup. She gestured to the caramel-colored chair without looking up. He sat. She finished reading one last page, turned it face down on the stack, and looked at him. "Preston Vance has done this before," she said. She didn't ease into it. That was Patrice's way. She said the thing directly, and then let it settle, before she said anything else. Andre didn't react. He just waited. 7 years ago, she continued, Preston was in a long-term relationship with a woman named Gail Ostrowski. She ran a small medical supply distribution company in Indianapolis. They were together for 3 years, never married, but she gave him signatory access to 2 of her business accounts. Patrice picked up a printed document and slid it across the desk toward him. Over the last 14 months of that relationship, $412,000 moved out of her accounts through a vendor called Hartwell Supply Group. Andre looked at the document. A registration record, similar to the one Kwame had pulled. Different company name, same structure, different city, same man in the organizer field. He registered Hartwell Supply Group 9 weeks before he ever met Gail Ostrowski, Patrice said. The company was built before the relationship started. He walked in with the infrastructure already in place. The room was quiet. The heating unit hummed somewhere inside the wall. They settled privately, Patrice said. Gail's attorney negotiated a repayment agreement, partial, and Preston signed an NDA. She was exhausted. She wanted it over. Patrice paused. The NDA kept it out of public records, but the business registration for Hartwell Supply Group is still public. The dissolution filing has a date. The timeline lines up. She folded her hands on the desk. He didn't stumble into this with Brianna. This is what he does. Andre sat with that for a moment. He thought about Brianna at the gas station, the certainty in her voice, the way she'd said what Preston said I deserved, without even catching herself. He'd read it as arrogance. Now he wasn't sure what it was. "Where does Brianna fit in this?" he asked. Patrice picked up her legal pad. "That's the part I've been thinking through. She had access to your accounts because she was your wife. She knew your vendor relationships, your business rhythms, your billing cycles." She set the pad down. "What I can't tell you yet is whether she understood what she was part of. She may have believed the shell company was a legitimate arrangement. She may have known exactly what it was." Patrice looked at him squarely. "What I can tell you is that she moved money on his behalf, out of your company, while you were still married. Knowingly or not, she was the mechanism." Andre didn't say anything for a moment. He was thinking about a version of Brianna he'd never fully considered. Not a schemer, not a mastermind, but something more ordinary and almost more sad. A woman who had gotten close to someone more calculating than she was, who had let him position her, who had probably told herself it was fine, because Preston had told her it was fine. It didn't change what she'd done. It didn't make the money come back or the years come back, but it clarified something about who the real architect was. "She's still responsible," Andre said. It wasn't a question. "Civilly, yes. Absolutely." Patrice pulled the folder back toward her side of the desk. "But with this pattern documented, we're no longer looking only at a civil claim against you. We're looking at a referral to the DA's office. Fraud. Breach of fiduciary duty. The prior scheme in Indianapolis gives us a basis to argue this is not an isolated incident. It is a deliberate, repeating pattern of financial predation." She paused. "That changes what this is." Andre looked out the window. The city was the same gray it had been Saturday morning. Flat clouds, flat light. "Keep building it," he said. "I intend to." Quietly. He looked back at her. Nothing visible, no letters, no filings, nothing that reaches them. Patrice nodded. "They won't hear a word from my office." He took the elevator down alone. In the lobby, he walked past the security desk and out through the glass doors and stood on the sidewalk for a moment. Cold air, exhaust from a bus pulling away from the curb, a woman walking fast past him with her head down. He pulled his keys from his pocket. He thought about Brianna standing at that gas pump, chin up, voice sharp, utterly certain that she still held something over him. He thought about Preston, wherever he was right now, comfortable, unworried. Andre walked to his car. He was going to let them stay that way, comfortable, unworried, for a little while longer. Kwame worked the way he always had, quietly, at a folding table he'd set up in the back corner of the warehouse office, surrounded by printed records and 2 open laptops. He didn't complain. He didn't ask for updates. He just worked. Andre had given him a simple task: cross-check every piece of business activity tied to Preston's known shell companies against Andre's own old operational records. Look for overlap. Look for anything that didn't belong. He'd been at it for 6 days when he called. "You need to come see this," Kwame said. He didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. Andre drove to the warehouse after hours. The parking lot was empty except for Kwame's truck. Inside, the overhead lights were off in the main bay. The back office glowed. Kwame was standing when Andre walked in, arms crossed, looking at the folding table like it had said something he was still processing. "Sit down," Kwame said. Andre sat. Kwame picked up a manila folder and opened it. Inside were 2 printed invoices, side by side. He set them on the table facing Andre. "Left one," Kwame said, pointing, "is an invoice template from our old billing system, 2019, the kind we used to send to mid-size clients during the early years." He moved his finger to the right. The one on the right came out of Preston's current business activity. New company. Registered 8 months ago. He's calling it Meridian Trade Partners. Andre looked at both invoices. Same column layout, same line item structure, same font choices in the header. Even the spacing between the service description and the unit price was identical. The company names and numbers were different. Everything else was a copy. "He used our templates," Andre said. "Almost exactly." Kwame pulled out a second set of pages. "I ran the routing numbers on Meridian's outgoing payments. They're going to a holding account registered in Indiana." He paused. "New account? Opened 4 months ago." Andre looked up. "He's running it right now," Kwame said. The words sat flat in the room. "Against who?" Andre asked. Kwame pulled out one more page, a business registration printout with a name highlighted in yellow. "A woman named Dolores Fitch. She runs a small packaging supply company out of Decatur. 8 employees. Been in business 11 years. He set the page down. "Based on what I'm seeing, she's already lost somewhere between $60,000 and $80,000. And she doesn't know it yet." Andre looked at Dolores Fitch's name on the page. He didn't know her. He'd never heard of her. She was just a woman trying to run a business. And Preston was already inside her accounts, already moving money, already working the same play he'd worked on Gail Ostrowski, the same one he'd built with Brianna, the same one he'd run on Andre without Andre even knowing it was happening. Andre picked up his phone and called Patrice. Patrice moved fast, but carefully. She located Dolores Fitch's business attorney through a public directory, made a confidential contact, and arranged a quiet meeting within 48 hours. No details over the phone. Andre went with her. Dolores Fitch was a compact woman in her mid-50s with close-cut gray hair and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She met them in a small conference room attached to her attorney's office and listened without interrupting as Patrice laid out what they'd found: the invoice templates, the routing numbers, the pattern from Indianapolis, the timeline. When Patrice finished, Dolores was quiet for a long moment. Then she opened a drawer in the table and pulled out a folder of her own. "I pulled these 2 weeks ago," she said. "I thought I was making an accounting error somewhere." She slid the folder across. "I've been losing sleep over it." She hadn't been making an error. Andre looked across the table at her and thought about a version of himself from 2 years ago, sitting alone in this same kind of room, not knowing what he didn't know, trusting that the numbers would eventually make sense. "We're going to help you document this," he told her. "Everything you have. We'll connect your records to ours. The more complete the picture, the stronger the referral to the DA." Dolores looked at him for a moment. "Why are you doing this?" "Because somebody should have stopped him before he got to me," Andre said. 3 days later, a process server showed up at Andre's company address. Brianna and Preston had filed a civil claim, marital contribution to post-divorce business success, publicly asserting that Brianna's years of support during the marriage had been essential to the growth of Andre's company, and that she was owed a percentage of its current valuation. The filing used language like foundational emotional investment and sacrificial partnership. It referenced the G-Wagon by make and model. It named the 7-figure contract. Andre read through all 11 pages standing at his front desk. His assistant watched him from across the room, clearly unsure whether to say anything. He set the pages down, straightened them into a neat stack, and took a breath. Then he called Patrice. "They filed," he said. "I saw it this morning," she said. "Let it proceed," Andre said. "Don't respond. Don't contest anything yet. Let them think it's working." A short pause on her end. "Understood," Patrice said. Patrice sent the request on a Tuesday morning. She kept the language simple and deliberate. Andre Whitfield wished to explore a private mediation option before the civil claim proceeded further. He wanted to avoid the public exposure of a prolonged court process. He was prepared to discuss a quiet resolution. That was all she wrote. The response came back in less than 3 hours. Preston's attorney, A man named Garfield Muse, whose firm had a polished website and very little case history that Patrice could find, replied that his clients were amenable to mediation at the earliest available date and looked forward to reaching an equitable resolution. Patrice forwarded the email to Andre with a single line beneath it. They bit. Andre read it once, put his phone face down on his desk, and went back to reviewing a freight manifest for a client in Memphis. He had a company to run. He ran it. But in the evenings, after the warehouse went quiet and the last driver clocked out, he worked with Patrice on the case file. They built it piece by piece, the way you'd stack a load for a long haul. Heaviest items on the bottom, everything secured, nothing left to shift around in transit. The shell company registration, the matching routing numbers, the invoice templates Kwame had pulled side by side. The timeline showing Preston's involvement predated the divorce filing by at least 14 months. The prior settlement out of Indianapolis, the one buried under an NDA that Patrice had obtained through a contact who knew the original plaintiff's attorney. Dolores Fitch's records, now fully documented and signed, $67,000 gone from her accounts, her own handwritten notes attached, her attorney's formal statement clipped behind them. And Kwame. Andre called him on a Wednesday night. "I need you in the room," Andre said. "I know," Kwame said. "What time?" That was the whole conversation. Andre told no one else. Not the full picture, anyway. Yolanda knew pieces. She'd been the one who flagged Preston's name in the first place, and Andre had checked in with her twice since then, letting her know things were moving. But he hadn't told her what was in the folder. He hadn't told her about Dolores Fitch, or the prior victim in Indianapolis, or what Patrice was prepared to refer to the DA the moment mediation concluded. He kept it tight. That was how he operated. You don't show your load until it's ready to be delivered. The meeting was set for Thursday at 9 in the morning. A neutral conference suite on the 14th floor of a downtown office building, the kind of place that rented by the hour to attorneys and mediators, furnished in beige and gray, designed to feel like nowhere in particular. Patrice confirmed it Wednesday evening with a short text. Room 1407, 9 a.m. Muse confirmed both clients will be present. Andre replied, "I'll be there." That night, he sat at his kitchen table with the folder open in front of him. He didn't read through everything again. He'd read it enough times that the details lived in him now, organized and settled. He just sat with it. Looked at the tab labels Patrice had made in her neat block lettering. Ran a thumb along the edge of the pages. He thought about the gas station. Brianna's voice carrying across the lot like she already knew she'd won something. What Preston said, I deserved. Her hand gesturing at the G-Wagon like it was a debt being collected. He thought about the folding table in the back of the warehouse. Kwame standing there, arms crossed, looking at two invoices that told a story nobody had meant for him to find. He thought about Dolores Fitch, sitting across the conference table with her own folder, pulling it out of the drawer with steady hands, saying, "I thought I was making an accounting error." He wasn't angry anymore. He'd been angry in Kwame's office that day, when the name Preston Vance appeared on a shell company registration attached to his own business records. That anger had been real, and it had been earned. But it had burned down now to something quieter and more solid, not heat, but weight. He closed the folder, finished his glass of water, went to bed. He slept well. The building lobby was cool and clean when he walked in the next morning. His dress shoes were quiet on the polished floor. He carried the folder at his side, nothing else. 14th floor, second hallway, room 1407. He pushed open the door. Brianna and Preston were already there, seated on the far side of the long conference table. Preston had on a charcoal blazer and a pale blue shirt, collar open, comfortable. He sat with his arm resting along the back of Brianna's chair, easy and relaxed, a man who had already decided how the morning would end. Brianna was dressed carefully, hair done, posture straight, and when she saw Andre walk in, the corner of her mouth lifted. Not a full smile, just the beginning of one, the look of someone collecting. Andre pulled out his chair, set the folder on the table in front of him, and sat down. He didn't smile back. The mediator's name was Carol Ewan. She was a small woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled back tight and reading glasses she kept lifting off her nose and setting back down again. She had a yellow legal pad in front of her and a pen she hadn't uncapped yet. She opened the session the way mediators always do. Ground rules, purpose, good faith. Preston nodded along like a man in church. Garfield Muse went first. He was younger than his website suggested. Mid-40s, clean suit, a voice that had been trained to sound reasonable. He laid out the claim with practiced ease. Brianna had been a committed partner during the foundational years of Andre's business, had provided emotional support and financial stability within the household, had endured significant hardship without complaint, and had received a settlement that could not have anticipated the dramatic upturn in Andre's fortunes that followed. He used the word equity 4 times. He used the phrase good faith contribution twice. He slid a single document across the table. A 1-page summary. The number at the bottom was $340,000. Brianna sat with her hands folded, composed. Preston kept his arm along the back of her chair, watching Andre with the quiet confidence of a man who had run this play before and knew how it ended. Muse finished, capped his pen, leaned back. "We believe," he said, "that a quiet resolution here serves everyone's interests." He looked at Andre when he said everyone's. Carol Ewan turned. "Mr. Whitfield, your response." Andre opened the folder. He didn't rush. He took the first set of documents out and set them in the center of the table with 2 hands, the way you'd set down something that had weight to it. "This is a shell company registration," he said, "filed 22 months ago during the final year of our marriage. The company is called Meridian Freight Solutions. It has no employees, no physical address, and no operational history." He paused. "It does have a bank account, and that account received wire transfers from my business. $43,000 over 11 months, routed through my own accounts under falsified vendor invoices." Brianna's chin lifted slightly. Her eyes didn't move. "The registration," Andre continued, "is in Preston Vance's name." Preston's arm came off the back of Brianna's chair. It was a small movement, barely visible, but Andre saw it. He set down the next page. Routing numbers, side by side, with Kwame's typed annotation beneath them, clean, factual, dated. "These are the matching routing numbers," Andre said. "Same account, same registrant. The money left my business and went directly into an account Preston controlled, 14 months before Brianna filed for divorce." Muse leaned forward and looked at the page. Something shifted in his face. Not panic yet, more like the beginning of a calculation being revised. Andre nodded to Kwame, who was seated 2 chairs down, a second copy of the records already in his hands. "Kwame Dixon," Patrice said from her seat beside Andre. "Operations partner, Whitfield Freight. He was present during the financial period in question. His testimony and documentation are included in the record." Kwame set his copy on the table without a word. Preston cleared his throat. "Those routing numbers could reflect any number of legitimate vendor arrangements. Without context—" "There's more," Andre said. He set down the 3rd document. "This is a prior settlement from 2019, Indianapolis. A business owner named Marcus Webb entered into a contractual arrangement with Preston that involved a shell company. The scheme was resolved privately and sealed under NDA. He slid a signed release across the table, one Patrice had worked 3 weeks to obtain. Mr. Webb authorized disclosure for purposes of this proceeding. Preston's jaw tightened. Brianna looked at him. It was the first time she'd looked at him since Muse finished talking. "And this," Patrice said, standing now, "is documentation from a current ongoing victim." She placed the last section of the file flat on the table. Dolores Fitch's records, her signed statement, her attorney's letter, $67,000, invoice templates copied almost directly from Andre's own old company records, still carrying the same formatting, the same margin spacing, the same font. Ms. Fitch is a small business owner currently being defrauded using the same mechanism, Patrice said. Her voice was level and exact. Her case has been fully documented. It will be referred to the district attorney's office when we conclude today. The room was quiet, not the polite quiet of a negotiation finding its footing. A different kind of quiet entirely. Brianna's composure didn't collapse all at once. It went piece by piece. The set of her shoulders first. Then the careful stillness of her hands, which were no longer folded but gripping the edge of the table. Then her eyes, which had gone somewhere far away from the beige walls of room 1407, somewhere private and frightened, like a person doing math they don't want the answer to. Preston opened his mouth. "Look, these documents don't establish what you're claiming they establish. You'd need to demonstrate intent, which requires—" "Intent is documented," Patrice said. Page 31. He stopped. Carol Ewan set down her pen. Muse was already leaning toward Preston, one hand raised, voice low, not advising, but containing. "I'm going to call a brief recess," Carol Ewan said. She didn't ask. 15 minutes. Muse was on his feet before she finished the sentence. "I'd like a private conference with my clients." His voice had lost the trained reasonableness entirely. The call from Patrice came on a Tuesday morning, 11 days after the mediation. Andre was at his desk going over load manifests when his phone buzzed. He let the manifests sit. "It's done," Patrice said. "The referral went to the DA's office this morning. Formal package. The Webb settlement, the Fitch documentation, the routing numbers, all of it." A pause. "They called me back within 2 hours, Andre. 2 hours. That tells you what they thought of what they were looking at." He leaned back in his chair. "What happens now?" "Now it moves on its own. We're no longer driving it." He thanked her and set the phone down. Outside his office window, 2 of his drivers were loading a trailer in the yard. One of them laughed at something the other said. The sound carried through the glass, thin and easy. He went back to the manifests. The criminal case against Preston Vance moved faster than Andre expected. Part of that was Dolores Fitch. She was a small woman in her early 50s who ran a regional linen supply company out of a warehouse in East Point. She had driven herself to Patrice's office 3 weeks before the mediation and sat down at the conference table with a manila envelope of her own records, still paper-clipped in the same order she'd received them. She wasn't shaking. She was furious. There was a difference, and it showed. Her testimony, given formally to investigators 6 days after the referral, was precise and unhurried. She walked them through every invoice, every wire transfer, every point at which Preston had redirected her trust and her money into the same account structure he had built inside Andre's business 2 years earlier. The invoice templates were what sealed it. Side by side, they were nearly identical. Same column headers, same font, same line item spacing. Preston had been too careful about everything except that. The one detail he hadn't bothered to change because he'd thought the original source was buried and gone. It wasn't. The civil side took a little longer, but not much. Muse withdrew from the marital contribution claim 9 days after the mediation. He submitted no explanation. He didn't need to. The filing was public record. Patrice's countercharges moved forward in his absence. The reversed settlement hearing was brief. The record was clean, the documentation was thorough, and Brianna had no effective rebuttal to the routing numbers or the vendor registration. The judge ordered a full clawback of the $43,000 in siphoned business funds. She added damages. The number in the final order was larger than the one Muse had written at the bottom of his one-page summary. Brianna would have seen the irony in that if she'd been in a position to find anything ironic. She wasn't. She had spent 2 years building something with Preston. A life that looked a certain way from the outside. A house in a good zip code. Dinners with the right people. A story about herself. The woman who'd finally left a dead-end marriage and found someone who actually valued her. That she had told so many times she had started to believe it without reservation. The legal proceedings didn't undo that story with gossip. There was no single dramatic moment when the phone calls started. It happened through public records. Through the case filing, which carried both names. Through Brianna's family attorney, who had been monitoring the civil matter and called her mother before Brianna had a chance to get ahead of it. Her mother called her once. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. There was no second call. Preston's image among his professional contacts collapsed differently, faster and with less room for reinterpretation. The men he did business with understood financial fraud in a way that was specific and without sympathy. They also understood that Marcus Webb's NDA release meant there had always been a prior incident they hadn't been told about. That particular detail traveled quickly and without embellishment. It didn't need any. Neither of them tried to spin it. There was nothing left to spin it into. Andre didn't follow their fallout closely. He didn't read the filings after Patrice sent her summaries. He didn't take calls from mutual acquaintances who had finally decided to offer their allegiance now that the outcome was clear. He let those calls go to voicemail and never returned them. Some people showed up late to the truth and expected to be welcomed for arriving at all. He wasn't interested. Patrice's final call came on a Thursday afternoon, 5 weeks after the mediation. "Criminal referral is active," she said. "Formal charges are expected by end of month, and the civil clawback order is finalized and entered. Both are moving forward, Andre, independently of anything you need to do or say going forward." He was quiet for a moment. "Okay," he said. "That's it? Okay?" "That's it." He could hear the faint smile in her silence. She understood it. She had watched him hold this thing for weeks without flinching, without rushing, without letting his anger get ahead of his judgment. "I'll send you the final file," she said. It arrived by email 20 minutes later. He opened it, read through the summary page, and closed it. Then he closed the physical folder on his desk, the one he'd carried into room 1407, and set it on the corner of the cabinet behind him. He didn't put it away. He just set it down. The conference room at Whitfield Freight smelled like fresh paint and new carpet. It had been a storage room 6 months ago. Now it had a table, 6 chairs, a whiteboard, and a small sign beside the door that read, "Operations, Kwame Dixon, Partner." Not Operations Manager, Partner. Kwame had argued against the sign, said it was unnecessary. Andre had the sign made anyway, because some things needed to be said plainly, in a permanent way, where people could read them. The equity agreement had been signed in March, 9 months after the mediation. It was straightforward. Kwame received a 12% stake in the company, retroactive credit toward the years he'd spent building it alongside Andre, and his name on the door. No ceremony, no press release, just 2 men who trusted each other, and a notary, and a handshake when it was done. "You didn't have to do this," Kwame had said, holding the folder. "I know," Andre said. "That's why I did." The company had expanded into 3 new distribution corridors since the regional contract closed. They had 14 trucks running now, a small administrative staff, a dispatcher named Cora, who was sharper than anyone Andre had interviewed and who had once corrected his load estimate in front of a client without blinking. He had given her a raise the following week. The growth wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It showed in the contracts, in the operating margin, in the fact that Andre had recently turned down a buyout offer from a larger logistics firm without agonizing over it. 2 years ago, an offer like that would have felt like rescue. Now, it just felt like someone else's idea of what his company was worth. He knew what it was worth. The mentorship sessions happened on the first and third Saturday of each month, in a rented room above a barber shop on Delmar Avenue, the same street where Andre had grown up, watching his father work 2 jobs and still come home tired. 6 young people, ranging from 19 to 26, each of them trying to build something real from a starting point that wasn't designed to help them succeed. Andre didn't come in with a motivational speech. He came in with a spreadsheet, or a sample contract, or a vendor comparison sheet, and he sat down at the table and worked through it with them like a problem to be solved. "Nobody's going to hand you the formula," he told them one Saturday, when a 22-year-old named Darius had spent 20 minutes explaining why the system was rigged against him. Andre didn't disagree with any of it. He just let Darius finish, and then said, "You're right about all of that. Now what are you going to do anyway?" Darius had been quiet for a moment. Then he picked up his pen. That was usually how it went. Naomi had started as a client. She ran a medical supply distribution company out of a facility on the west side, and she had hired Whitfield Freight for a regional contract 8 months ago based on a referral from Dolores Fitch, of all people. The first few months had been professional and nothing more. She was direct, organized, and had no patience for vague timelines. Andre respected that immediately. The shift had been gradual. A longer call than necessary after a successful delivery run. A coffee that ran 40 minutes over. A dinner that wasn't a business dinner, but that neither of them named as anything else until the third one. She was easy to be around. That was the word for it. Easy. There was no performance required, no version of himself he had to maintain or defend. She said what she meant. She laughed without checking whether it was appropriate, and when he was quiet, she didn't fill the silence with noise. It was nothing like his marriage. That contrast wasn't a wound anymore. It was just a fact, sitting quietly in the background, no longer requiring his attention. Patrice had sent a brief email 2 months ago. Preston's trial date is set for late spring. Brianna's clawback is finalized and enforced. I don't expect either matter to require anything further from you. Andre had read it once, replied with 2 words, "Thank you," and moved on. He didn't feel satisfaction when he thought about it. He didn't feel much of anything. The whole thing had the quality of a calculation that had resolved correctly. The numbers had balanced. That was what it was. He was driving Naomi home on a Thursday evening in October when he saw it. The gas station sat at the corner of Mercer and Fifth, lit up orange and white in the early dark, the canopy casting its flat glow over the pumps. A woman in a gray jacket was filling up a sedan. A teenager leaned against the wall eating chips. Ordinary. Completely ordinary. Andre's eyes passed over it the way they passed over every other block on the route. Registered, catalogued, released. No tightening in his chest. No old film reel starting up behind his eyes. Nothing pulled at him. Naomi was mid-sentence, talking about a logistics bottleneck she'd been working through all week. her hands moving slightly, the way they did when she was thinking through a problem out loud. He listened. The gas station fell behind them. He kept driving. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.